This video is brought to you by my patrons and sponsored by CoolStuffInc.com and Hero Forge.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years.
There are many ways to play Magic wrong, you would know, but most of these follies are due to misunderstanding rules, not anticipating interaction, or going into formats, environments and tournaments without reading the primer. If you've got time to watch my bloated videos, you can look up at least the colour pair archetypes of a set before you sit down to draft. Don't be a knob. But there's one way of playing Magic that people get wrong all of the time, not because they're bad at deck building or don't read the cards, but because they're approaching the entire philosophy of the niche incorrectly. I'm of course talking about red deck wins. Now, Fire Drinker Satyr is a classic Jungian archetype. Oh, Sam's already made that video. Oh, curse his work ethic. Okay, we'll talk about Group Hug instead. Hello, spicy people of the internet. My name is Spice8Rack, aka Baby No Money, and welcome back to the channel. Group Hug is one of those deck archetypes that everyone thinks they want to play right up until the point they remember why they haven't made their own deck yet. At the start, drawing cards and generating extra mana is like playing Magic with the triple mushroom power-up from the Mario Kart. Group Hug decks usually let your deck do what your deck wants to do faster than usual. The trouble is, it only takes a handful of universal benefits for one player to absolutely rocket into the lead. The Esper Battlecruiser deck, for instance, naturally kept in check due to their lack of intrinsic ramp, can become a high-velocity nightmare if given the chance to make extra land drops or even play things from their hand for free. Sometimes it's even the Group Hug deck which becomes a menace, dumping every Howling Mine equivalent you can imagine before dropping Scrawling Crawler and revealing itself to actually be several Nekazars in a trench coat. Things can simultaneously get turbocharged with a Group Hug deck at the table, and also feel impotent. You can dump your hand quickly, gain a bunch of life and draw any number of cards, but it can be undone when the next player does the exact same thing and overtakes you again. Extending the Mario the Kart metaphor, if everybody gets a triple mushroom, the game is quantitatively faster, but not qualitatively different. This is where, for me, the philosophy of Group Hug goes awry. In attempting to give each player equal benefits, it ends up only actually benefiting the players who would have already had the edge in the game. Instead, what we should be aiming for in Group Hug is closer to what is often labelled as politics-style decks. Ones which are usually crammed with cards which enact or manipulate votes, or which pit players against each other, or which boost your board in exchange for also improving that of another player to facilitate metagame deals. For some people, even this represents too much politics in their game spaces. Do not shelter from the authorities with these people. They will rat you out on a tip line before they even know if there's a reward or not. If I may climb, nay, disappear inside my own arse for a moment, the difference between these two outlooks mirrors that of liberal equality of opportunity and socialist equality of outcome. In both life and in gameplay, the former seems like the fairest, with everybody given the same tools to succeed with, and where those who best utilise those tools come out on top. Of course, however, no one is actually starting from the same position. Some people come to a game of Commander with a strictly less powerful deck, and some people are born as the scion of an apartheid emerald mine tycoon who, not content with the title of richest man of all time, is currently running America's planes into each other because Joe Rogan told him that black lesbians are allowed to fly on them now. I'm actually flying out to America in a couple of days as I'm filming this video, and even if the plane doesn't spontaneously combust because someone ripped out the load-bearing DEI, I might not be able to enter the country for much longer anyway. So if I do perish and this video is put up posthumously, you better make the fundraiser attached to it go absolutely nutty. I'll talk more about it in a little bit. Let that be my legacy. Or this, poo-poo pee-pee, whichever one happens to float your boat, I guess. I really hope I don't die now, that would suck. When inequality exists at the foundation of a social or game system, an active effort to rebalance the outcome of navigating those systems using equity is necessary for human dignity and eventual liberation in the former's case, and an interesting sub-game for you to orchestrate in the latter. I'd argue that this form of group hug keeps the game far more interesting. Not only does it mean that anyone getting overshadowed by other players here gets more opportunities to make a difference in gameplay, but whoever happens to be leading the game ends up having to fight for victory as opposed to potentially breezing through to an easy win. You also get to make more decisions yourself. Rather than just slamming every card that lets all players gain a bunch of life, you're making decisions about which opponent to elevate and which to hold back. Like a benevolent Machiavelli. Which sounds like a delicious pasta dish that would definitely kill me if I ate it. So, now that we've done the required unnecessary propagandistic preamble, let's get to some deck building. Magic has made a number of legendary creatures who frequently crop up as popular group hug commanders. Glunch the Bestower, Kenrith the Returned King, the Gaze, but for this deck I want to give the EDH team specifically props by using Ms. Bumbleflower, the face card of Bloomburrow's group hug precon. Yes, that's right ladies, she is single. Is that what Ms means? Does Ms mean you're single? I don't fucking know, I'm not a woman. Although, Bumbleflower's ability not only does exactly what we want, providing tangible benefits to specific opponents, but it does so at instant speed, allowing you to barter for favours on anyone's turn, whilst also letting you build the bunny up to be a legitimate threat on the table. Another issue group hug decks run into is that of closing out the game. Run no win cons and you become nothing more than a damage sink that other players have to occasionally chip away at. Run too much in the way of synergistic threats and you transform yourself into a group slug player, where all of your benefits become inverted curses. This isn't a wrong way to play the game, mind you, just not quite the kind of vibe we're trying to generate. Bumbleflower has a consistent way to put counters on creatures and give them evasion while still providing your competitors with delicious card draw. It is a perfect middle ground between these two realities. A number of other cards from Bumbleflower's precon. Shit me! Bumbleflower's precon. A number of other cards from Bumbleflower's precon will also make it into our list. Octomancer can gift an 8/8 to the most creature-light opponent, whilst also eventually giving us one of our own, plus any tokens other players make in the future. Communal Brewing is a card which seems innocuous at first, but which both lets us sculpt who we want to draw cards in case we need to cut a problematic player off from too many resources, whilst also pumping all of our future creatures up. Perch Position, one of my favourite cards from the precon, gives the greatest gift of all, an extra turn to the most hard done by player at the table. In addition to that, it lets us not only sit out for a round or three of bickering and combat, but when we do return, we do so with a hefty board to boot. Here is another perceived core of group hug, which often causes decks built around it to stagnate. When your game plan is helping everyone else around the table, you fall to immediate disadvantage in that everybody else's already existing game plan is turbocharged by yours. Cards like Rite of Flourishing are iconic in most group hug lists, but are also emblematic of the issue in the philosophy of group hug. Girapur Ori is a step up, letting players make extra land drops, but only actually helping hellbent players to draw cards. A card like Rootweaver Druid is an even bigger improvement. Whilst it lets all of your opponents ramp basic lands onto the field, it lets you take one of them, improving everybody else's board state, but ensuring that you are almost always coming out ahead. Loran of the Third Path is the cleanest piece of equitable group hug. She destroys an artifact or enchantment upon entering to your personal benefit, and then shares targeted card draw between you and an opponent of your choice. It must be remembered that it's not enough to give a flagging opponent a helping hand up, you must also swat away at the other hand which seeks to keep them down. There are a few more legendary creatures to act as lieutenants for this list. Glunch, mentioned previously, benefits a modifiable 3 of the 4 players in your pod on your end step, yourself included, and honestly would have been my primary choice as the commander for this deck if it wasn't a once per turn effect, and if Bumbleflower didn't give us access to blue. Blue, which is used to play another legendary creature, Sir Dane the Shipwright, who allows everybody to take up the role of senator, voting for a player around the table to draw a card, but with everybody who receives no votes instead getting to play show and tell. Creatures. Legendary or otherwise. Every commander deck has at least one. Except for the ones who don't, but those are abominations better left unconsidered. If only there was a way to showcase your love for and dedication to a particular creature. Sure, you have deck boxes, card sleeves and playmats, but do you have dice? Hero Forge, the model-making site that you've sunk at least a full day of your human life into fiddling about with, has a new custom dice Kickstarter. Now you can put customizable models of your OCs and favourite creatures into 3D printed spin-down form. Check out this one they made for me, a thematic rabbit pondering a bird. Or this life-accurate rendering of my actual body. By owning this effigy of myself encased in an icosahedron resin prison, I will now never age and can never die. That's just how good the Kickstarter is. You can get standard D20 sizes or these jumbo babies that I've got my mitts on. You can customize the die and number color, select any of the polyhedral dice that you desire to seal something inside of, and switch between life spin down and standard dice layouts. Anything in Hero Forge can be put into these bad boys, including these 3 rabbits who are now my best friends. So why don't you head Watership down to their Kickstarter page linked below. Backers can receive early access to the dice maker, statuettes, or even the chance to design an item to be added into Hero Forge itself. The Kickstarter ends April 4th, so make sure you roll on over before then and become the envy of your next Commander pod or tabletop session. Thanks again to Hero Forge for sponsoring this video, and I'll hand you back over to Past Spice. Ha! You've got it, Future Spice. Fucking sellout. Targeted benefits with subtle personal upsides really are the bread and butter of this philosophy. The hunted creatures, specifically Phantasm and Lamassu, help get creature-light opponents back into the race whilst providing you with evasive beatsticks. The demonstrate spells, excavation, healing and replication technique let you dual cast for the cost of giving an opponent a copy, which can easily be politicked into adding further benefits to your game plan. Oxdrover and Gore Muldrek produce tokens for our opponents, and us if we have our Octomancer out, the first allowing us to draw cards in exchange for those bodies, the latter giving us protection from those bodies, or even producing those tokens for our own board if we're the player furthest behind. As if we didn't have enough card draw already, Words of Wisdom, Sail into the West and Sphinx of Enlightenment are ways to give our opponent's card draw in exchange for more cards ourselves. There's another niche of cards that I've always loved for this kind of game plan that often get overlooked for more universal pieces. In particular, Spurn Mage, Null Mage, and Shield Mage Advocate. The first taps to destroy attacking creatures, the second artifacts and enchantments, and the third prevents damage to creatures or players. Their cost, however, comes in the requirement to return cards from your opponent's graveyards to their hands. Normally, this would be an awful trade-off, but letting a player who's lagging behind get a threat back from their yard, or politicking the return of a favourable counterspell in order to blow up and impact tremors, fits into our strategy perfectly. Immortal Obligation is even more direct, a 2-mana reanimate but only for your opponent's creatures, which then renders them unable to attack you or block any of your creatures. And if we're going to be getting cards back from our opponent's graveyards, we may as well get in on the action ourselves. Skullwinder and Dawnbreak Reclaimer let us get cards back with some kind of symmetry, whilst Evolution Witness lets us return permanents to our hand each time Ms. Bumbleflower puts a counter on it. We should talk a little bit about the pieces which serve to benefit us exclusively. Helping flagging players catch up to the pack is only going to be fun if you're in the pack yourself. A few classics like Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Entish Restoration, Sakura Tribe Elder, Swiftfoot Boots, Inspiring Call, and Frantic Search to help enable multiple casts on our opponent's turns all make the cut. Incubation Druid and Kami of Whispered Hopes ramp out our best cards thanks to Miss Bumbleflower's counters, and whilst those counters don't synergize with Final Word Phantom, they do massively help Kian Corrupted Memory, both cards giving us access to instant speed casting on a reasonable budget. Also, I'm fully aware that he works for the LAPD, but if there was the opportunity to have a group hug with Columbo, you better believe that I'm getting involved. That is the most liberal sentiment you will see on this channel from here on out. There's also Generous Pup, which turns our first Miss Bumbleflower trigger each turn into a board-wide buff. A very good boy indeed. Propaganda, Windborne News, and Dissipation Field protect our face from attacks, whilst the last one also deals with problematic mass damage generators like Perforos God of the Forge or Sir Conrad the Grim. Mangara the Diplomat similarly encourages our opponents to not come for our throats, whilst also letting us fill our hand with cards when they cast the spells that we've let them draw. And I've also popped in a Simic Ascendancy. Look, there is discourse around how fun the you win the game cards are in Commander. Everyone outside of CEDH considers Labman and Thoracle to be annoying combo pieces, and when the life gain deck gets out an early Felidar Sovereign with Lightning Greaves attached to it, no one is particularly jazzed at the table. But Ascendancy falls into the sweet spot for us as a card which, unlike some of the other win the game effects like Near-Death Experience or Barren Glory, can actually go off, but doesn't just mean that once you hit your upkeep, the game is over. Besides, if there is ever a time and a place for a slightly goofy way to win the game without necessarily taking anyone else out of it, it's in a group hug deck. There are also a couple of removal pieces like Colony Ambush and Cabria Takedown, as well as Sejuri Shelter, which... Look, the land spells are easy shoo-ins for almost any deck. If I wasn't trying to keep this to a reasonable budget, Seagate Restoration and Balaged Recovery would have been the first cards in this list. Wait, what was the budget for this deck again? $100?! It's like 4 eggs. Gosh, I do wish I had a way of knocking some of that price off. Oh, fuck me, I do!
CoolStuffInc.com has sponsored my work for about 40 years now and have never let me down, even when I've asked terrible things of them. In exchange for their silence, they're offering my audience 5% off of any order when you use code SPICE at their checkout. They have singles, sealed product, and so much more. Want to put this deck list together or think me a fool and wish to construct your own better version? Then be sure to do so using CoolStuffInc.com and save 5% off that order when you use code SPICE at checkout. Thank you to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this video, and now to hand back over to Future Spice in a confusing temporal twist.
No problem, past Spice. Wait, does that make me the sellout? We do run a bunch of removal in this list. After all, we are in effect a control deck. We're just controlling the game to be a slightly more unorthodox thing. As a result, the rest of the removal is designed to give as it takes. Rapid Hybridization, Swords to Plowshares, Beast Within, Generous Gift, Oblation, Bovine Iteration. Iteration? Spend some money on a prompter. Invest in a faster production schedule. Well, that would be great if I could fucking read words, wouldn't it? Bovine Intervention, Fractured Identity, Nature's Claim, and Winds of Abandon all get rid of troublesome permanents whilst leaving a commiseration gift for the persons whose shit we just rocked. Trap the Trespassers is less beneficial, but does allow for the most troubled click at the table to gang up on the most hated creatures at instant speed. You could even barter one player's vote with a Bumbleflower trigger, like a Furry Machiavelli. That's the second Machiavelli. Do I really not know any more conniving philosophers? I guess he is the one. Who else is conniving? No, you're just fucking evil. There are a handful of extra specific cards I'd like to talk about too. Arbiter of Knowledge is a great equalizer, an effect that brings definite equality for each player's life total, tying them with whoever happens to have the most life around the table. Another creature which I just adore is Perplexing Chimera. This absolute oddity from Born of the Gods is a 3/3 for 5 that acts as a permanent rattlesnake for your opponent's best cards, swapping itself for control over anything powerful they may cast, and giving them the ability to swap it in the same way later. Not only does this one card add so much tension in each decision your opponent makes when it comes to casting their spells, but seeing as the majority of your own cards are aimed at assisting flagging players, you won't be too put out if one of your cards gets nabbed later down the line. Victory Chimes is another card I've been putting in more of my decks lately. Usually this is because always having access to one replenishing extra mana on my opponent's turn is rarely a bad move, but here it also does double duty as a political tool, ramping players who you choose to help and holding it up for instant speed removal against those you're trying to hinder. Duelist's Heritage is another similar card, letting you optionally give an attacking creature double strike on each player's turn, helping you to whittle down the life gain player's health pool, or simply giving a struggling player's lifelinker an extra boost. Misleading Signpost both acts as a mana rock, but also comes into play at instant speed for an extra Bumbleflower trigger on our opponent's turn, and messes up the target of our most threatening opponent's most deadly creature. I also want to point out View from Above. Not only can you use this to aid your opponents in attacking over another enemy's defenses, but in returning to your hand, provided you have a white permanent like Miss Bumbleflower out, you can repeatedly cast this card as long as you have at least 2 mana, one of them blue. Depending on how much mana you go into your opponent's turn with, you could easily be drawing 6 cards and putting 6 extra power on your board each rotation. This is such a neat, innocuous little piece. And finally, and most flavourfully, we have Dawn's Truce, a 2 mana, almost Teferi's Protection, which also tosses a token of assistance to one of our opponents. This is the most expensive card in the list, around $7, but the deck frankly felt incomplete without its inclusion. In terms of land base, we're again keeping to a reasonable budget and a lower power level here. It's not power level anymore, it's brackets. So I need to change that in the script. Does perch position giving our opponent an extra turn mean that this deck doesn't fall into bracket 1 anymore? Or is it bracket 5? Oh God, I'm so fucking jet lagged. In terms of lands, we're using all of the temples, pain lands, battle lands, cycling jewels, check lands, and a couple of the Shadowmoor filter lands. Wooded Bastion is still quite a bit pricier than the others that we can use. Not that I particularly mind, because Mystic Gate still has some of the most unsettling art on any Magic card, and I'm always chuffed to run it in a deck list. We also have Command Tower, Path of Ancestry, Seaside Citadel, Evolving Wild, Terramorphic Expanse, 5 forests, 5 plains, and 3 islands, alongside Tranquil Landscape. I haven't written it in the script, and I can't be asked to look it up, so I'm assuming that's the correct card that I mean to say. And finally, rounding off the list, we have Alchemist Refuge for flash enabling, and Gear Reach Sanitarium for the last salt sprinkle of shared fortune on this family-style feast. If you did want to spring for some pricier upgrades, a few cards do immediately come to mind. Obviously, MDF cards like Sink into Stupor can come in, each other one replacing a land in your list, which of course themselves can be upgraded with fetch lands, shock lands, and crime scenes. Look, I know everybody calls them surveil lands, but they're all homages to locations notable in crime fiction. Why are we using the most pedestrian naming conventions for them? When did we lose our lust for life? What did they do to us? What did they do to us? Ripples of Potential both pumps and saves any creatures you have with counters on them for only 2 mana, and Swan Song is a counterspell which gives your opponent a bird for only 1 mana. Yes, unfortunately, it does cost $16 at the time of recording. $16? That's like a quarter of an egg. You know, it's really wild that the American Empire is just dismantling itself before our eyes. It's like Elon Musk's gone into the White House and has just started ripping out the copper wiring. 9 out of 10 accelerationists hate him. Learn his secrets. Seedborn Muse would allow you to both help your opponents on their turns more consistently, whilst also giving your board pseudo-vigilance. Tidal Barracuda lets players play as if they all controlled a Videlcan Orrery, but whilst also shutting down their ability to cast things on your turn, a subtle but often devastating restriction. Tempt with Bunnies is another delightful Bumbleflower precon card. Honestly, if you can get hold of one of these boxes for a reasonable price, it is not a bad starting point for actually building this deck. This card shares cards and bunnies, whilst of course benefiting your board more so than your opponent's. Master of Ceremonies was originally in this list, and then its price inflated between when I wrote this and now for some reason. And finally, Feldergriff himself, the original Group Hug commander, could well find a home here, letting you pump life gain into a low player, fill out a besieged opponent's battlefield, or pooping out cards like a magician after eating bad seafood. And on that objective low point in the script, it's time to conclude. So, what do you think? Is a more equitable approach to Group Hug the correct route out of the malaise of universal good stuff, or is this just an exercise in king-making? Let me know your thoughts and any cards you think would do well in this list down below. I would also say some words on the fundraiser attached to this video. Over the past year or so, I've been fundraising for various charities supporting Palestinians, and whilst we've all in all raised around $37,000, not including the work I did with War Child, so much more needs to be done. I'll be kicking off this fundraiser with $2,000 of my own money, which I'm only able to do thanks to Patreon and sponsorships, and I plan to do some fun challenge stream next month like what Jacob Geller has done, donating $1 in support of immigrant families for each demon slain in Doom. If you have any fun notions about what I should do and who the money should go to, please either let me know down below or tell me on Blue Sky. It's the only social media I have now. It's not perfect, but at least it isn't run by one of these fucking weirdos. Unfortunately, you will have to follow me on Twitch to watch and support the stream, which is owned by a weirdo. Weirdos all the way down, it would seem. Fundamentally, if you agree with the notion of an equitable group hug deck where, in a very sort of Fanon sense, the last may become first, then please do give what you can to this fundraiser and keep an eye out for the future ones that I will be running on Twitch. Once again, thanks to CoolStuffInc.com and Hero Forge for sponsoring this video, and an extra special thank you to all of my patrons who are the ones that fundamentally make this work possible, whose names include... Ryan Lindau, 3D0, a communist right dimple, a delicious slice of poultry, a filthy communist bunny, a gay American couple, a German teacher in Oklahoma, a treasure token featuring Spice8Rack's face, a waste of a perfectly good skeleton, A, B, C, D, F, E, G, H, K, I, J, L, N, M, O, P, Q, S, R, T, V, W, U, X, Y, Z, Adam Gable, Aesthetic Dialectic, Agent Maxwell, AJ Ingram, Alessia Karnin, Alex Berman, Aglai D. Siswai, or Barry, Alice Perales, Ali, an alt-right sleeper agent who gives money to communists, Bika Idaka, probably Tybalt's Persona, I draw penises on pastries, an entire council of ghosts, an exhausted capybara, Andrew Elf, Anne Morgana, Anthrocarbon reminds some examiners that original ideas don't have any references, tongue your own sponsor's arse. I feel like there's some personal history there. Astra Jade, Austin L, Bacchus98, Basu Gasu Bakuhatsu Bakumatsu, Burb Seed, Blake Evers, Bloodergun, Brian Dunn, Bridget Huang Tong, but you can call me Thrakazod, Briar Director HK Bergdahl, Kaja, Carl, or is it Carl? That is the question, Charles Cohen, Krista Voss, Clayton Spezia, Conflicted Psyches, Connor Rentz, Cube Artisan, D. Morton, Daniel Morris, Daniel Rudeminer, David Reynolds, Dizzy Pup, Dr. Rhino, Duncan Lindsay, Earl Grey T, Edward Gordon, Eric Lindahl, Errant Lanthy, Etienne Chapion Masson, Evgenij, Faxel, Flavor Police, a Cavu Enthusiast, Frozen Monarch, Future Beagle, Gayula, Queen Among Bears, Georgi Lubinov, Georgina Coffey, G. Gritsley, Gitu Nullmage, Gub, Guilty Sonder, Hamburger Time, Horny Badger, House Rule, Hoopered Up, I Am Kaz, I Didn't Think the Lithatog Was Gonna Eat My Lands, Imbecilicus Rex, in response I Bolt Myself, in response Table Flip, in response I Mental Misstep Your Bolt, Paying 2 Life. Izza, Beastie in Training, Jack Bradley, Jackson Crispin, Jackson Seamayer, Jackson West, James Wigley, Jennifer Klein, Joseph Schultz, Josh, Joshua M. Stephan, Julius Home, Kay Santam, Keir Starmer's Tory Socks, Khans of Tarkir is anti-Saltai revisionist propaganda, Kieran Thal, Kamoli, Let Zimone Say Fuck Rio, Kyber Genesis, Kyle Denley, Lysius, Linnea, Madame Monroe, Magic Arcanum, Magic Fellow, Mars Faye, Max, MB, Menti the Mage, Metal Gamer 21, Mika, Moon Prison, Moose, Morbid Panda, Not Witty, Nathan Brinson, Nemo Dakar, Niels Bitzer, Num 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 Num, Yoshi! Nox, a trans otter longing to get back to Lorwyn, Nuke CY, Oh Worm, Omar Al-Tibai. One day I will float into the sky like a balloon and my helium will be lost forever. One single mungus, pronounced like mungus, like in humongous. Feel free to read this part out as well. Papa Crane, the Cuddle Demon, Pappy Markov was a mistake. Peroxide, Peter Carter, Phoenix Swans, Pivo, Potion Celador, Kwasu, Rakaver Cavalli, read this in the voice of Bernard Herzog. Robin, Samuel Kona, Scrimblow Bimblow, the lovable Skronko, several goblins in a trench coat, Sean Pitre, Siegfried Pinzer, Sin for Goblin Jesus, Slowbad who died for those sins, Skolaton, Skyfire, someone who sees the beauty in nature and thinks, wow, that would make a really cool land card, Sorry Zia, Shrinks, Thars Refined Grizzly, the A-positive blood type goddess of death, the anarchist insert to the world's strangest grocery sitcom, the entire B-movie script, the future should fear me but it's the other way around, the Jellybean Warlock, the Tamio Memorial Orphanage of Kamigawa, the Morik, the one who plays, Thomas Quinlan, Thomas Saint, Titanic Bark 68, Totally a Spy, aka He Who Simps for Emrakul, hashtag She Has Returned to Us, hashtag I Told You She'd Return, Travis K, Twilord, Undead Herbs, Uranix Starix, War Crimes Uwu, well, you asked for it, Wesley, that rat bastard communist. When I close my eyes, Niall Sylvain is there, watching, waiting, smiling, Whirlwind Abyss, Whiskey Jack, White Orchid Wayfarer, Will Drame, Wojo Natior, that's a new one, Wojonator, Wolf and Stoat, a gay Americana love story, yeah, Yorick Brekov, Xanoron, and Zoidtastic. And thank you to all of my other wonderful patrons who keep my lights on. I'm going to be away for a little bit. I know that there was a big break between my last video and now, but the next one that I'm working on is, it's going to be a bit cinematic, and I've had to do a lot of research for it. So I hope you're ready to start your engines. I hope that that's a good enough clue for what the next video is going to be about. Anyway, hope you're doing well, and as always, stay spicy.